This is St. Louis on the Air from St. Louis Public Radio. I'm Elaine Cha.
And then there were, of course, these media roundtables on what Brat is. That is also part of the process of killing Brat.
Mm-hmm. My students tend to be almost oblivious to mainstream media.
Young people started seeing Harris's embrace of the meme as being kind of pandering.
The fact that me saying that showcases that I'm pandering.
It's hard if you're not very much online to get a meme. But in some ways, that's the point of a meme, so that it's almost like an inside joke amongst people that can relate to the same sentiment.
Political campaigning is in full swing, and during these decidedly unprecedented times, Americans and folks across the world are paying close attention. Every word a candidate utters, including vivid or unusual turns of phrase, can be turned into a slogan or joke. And every move, be it taking a drink of water, winking an eye, or an awkward stumble, can become a GIF made for fun or to make fun. An example from pre-Twitter times that was all over mainstream media, the exuberance of 2004 presidential candidate Howard Dean. His excitement at an Iowa rally was dubbed the Dean Scream and is credited for the undoing of his bid for presidency.
We're going to California and Texas and New York, and we're going to South Dakota and Oregon and Washington and Michigan, and then we're going to Washington, D.C. to take back the White House. Yeah!
Today, Vice President Kamala Harris is the subject of memes that have circulated broadly online and become part of pop culture and news coverage, posts involving coconuts.
My mother she would give us a hard time sometimes, and she would say to us, "I don't know what's wrong with you young people. You think you just fell out of a coconut tree? You exist in the context of all in which you live and what came before you."
And a British pop album titled Brat by Charli XCX. Here's a bit of one of her songs called Club Classics.
When I go to the club, I wanna hear those club classics. Club classics, club classics. When I go to the club, I wanna hear those club classics. Club classics, club classics.
Gen Z has been credited with these memes and energizing younger voters around Harris's bid to become the Democratic Party's official nominee for president. But how much of this memeing affects what people think about and how they decide to act? What impact could it have on candidates the rest of this campaign season? Basically, what does any of this really meme? Joining us in studio to talk about pop culture, memes, and politics is Keli Jackson, professor of communication at St. Louis University. Keli, welcome to St. Louis on the Air.
Thank you for having me. Great to be here.
We're also joined by Sophie Hurwitz, a reporter for Mother Jones, covering politics and social movements. Welcome to you as well, Sophie.
Thanks for having me.
So whenever we talk about anything that lives primarily on the internet, starting with some defining and scene setting, as it were, is usually our first order of business. So let's start there. Sophie, you and your colleagues at Mother Jones wrote about this Brat phenomenon last week. But to begin, what exactly is Brat? And that is, who started it and how did it become part of Vice President Harris's campaign?
So Brat initially was an album by British pop star Charli XCX, who interestingly is not Gen Z herself, but is a millennial. She's 31. Mm-hmm. The album came out last month, and the promo for the album started all the way back in February. The album cover is this very striking lime green color, and a lot of the sort of organic online promotion of that album was in the form of people just taking pictures of lime green things they saw and saying, "This is so Brat," or saying, "I'm having a Brat summer," which could kind of mean, the way Charli XCX put it, what it means to be Brat is, quote, "someone who feels like herself, but maybe also has a breakdown, but kind of like parties through it, is very honest, very blunt." And so I think that people would describe themselves as having a Brat summer if they are out partying a lot or if they're, thinking about what does it mean to be out partying when there are so many horrible things happening in the world. So then Kamala Harris comes in around July 3rd when a Twitter user, ex-user, whatever, posted an edit of Kamala Harris saying the coconut tree phrase that was just played, overlaid with a song from Brat and with Brat's kind of iconic lime green color. And I think a lot of people found that really charming and absurd, and an unexpected combination of things. And Brat just sort of spiraled from there.
And became part of the campaign as far as the banner goes, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So there were at least, I think, a few days of Brat being this kind of totally organic thing where different songs got edited onto videos of Kamala Harris, and people made jokes about, like, oh, is running for president a Brat summer thing? And then I think the meme took a turn when official groups such as the Harris campaign decided they were in on the joke and they wanted in on this. So the Harris Campaign HQ Twitter account, when she declared her candidacy, switched its banner to the Brat font and the Brat color, and started posting these same edits. And so suddenly it wasn't just this kind of grassroots discursive mode, it was part of the official discussion.
Right. So Keli, the context now for Brat has been made clearer by Sophie, but that the tweet led to a host of memes that revolve around VP Harris, and that tweet was a tweet by Charli XCX. Kamala is Brat. Now, you teach a whole course on memes and social media. What are memes and what is the purpose they serve?
So memes actually predate the internet, but they are really part of internet culture. So a meme refers to something that can be passed between people quickly. They tend to be ephemeral. They tend to be iterative, meaning everybody puts their own little spin on it. No one particularly owns a meme. They are one of the shortest forms of storytelling for us right now digitally. So we can put music, images, all kinds of things together to communicate really quickly a sentiment. And that is what we sort of see with memes, and how they explode and have a very quick rise, but also sometimes a quick fall. They can be short-lived.
Is there an example that you can provide of sort of pre-internet meme?
Sure. So we could think about editorial cartoons. Oftentimes, memes are considered a modern-day version of that. They are less serious often, but there have been old ones. I think they dated one back to the 1920s, where someone was doing a literal version of a meme that we would see now, where how you think you look when you're taking a photo, and it's like this very dapper man, and then how you actually look, and the cartoon is sort of this deflated version of his face. And we have those memes right now. Like, people do that all the time.
Right. So knowing that we've got some vocabulary and all that out of the way or set, let's discuss then how all this actually shapes discourse around politics, especially during the campaign now for president. Sophie, you're the Gen Zer in the room, and in your article from Mother Jones, you declared Brat dead almost as soon as folks outside social media got wind of it. You talked a little bit about it just before Keli responded. But why is it dead already when a lot of us, I will include myself in that group, a lot of us older generation people, we just got caught up?
Well, first of all, I would like to state that though I am 25 years old, I don't speak for every member of Gen Z and do not speak for how everyone feels about Brat.
Sure.
I think that the reason my colleagues and I, declared Brat dead, as you put it, was because it had been co-opted by the Harris campaign. The meme was no longer just kind of this funny, absurdist thing people were doing on the internet. It was something that I think a lot of young people started seeing Harris's embrace of the meme as being kind of pandering. like, yes, she's understanding the aesthetics of what people are talking about, but at the time, I think a lot of people felt she wasn't engaging with the substance of what Gen Z people want to see from a president. And then there was sort of this pushback and this feeling of, you can't just get our votes by putting a lime green filter on a picture of your face. You have to actually engage on a policy level. And so that is why we sort of provocatively declared Brat to be dead, because the meme in its organic sense was pretty much over by the time the Harris campaign picked it up and Charli declared Kamala Harris to be Brat. And then there were, of course, these media roundtables on what Brat is. That is also part of the process of killing Brat. So that is why I made that argument.
Yeah. So, Keli, in your description of what a meme is, memes are a language. And so how is it that people can keep up with the language if it's going out of fashion so quickly?
Language is ever evolving, both offline and online. Online, obviously, very quickly. And so we see that it's hard if you're not very much online to get a meme. But in some ways, that's the point of a meme, so that it's almost like an inside joke amongst people that can relate to the same sentiment. If you're outside of that joke, it's kind of okay. You know what I mean? It's okay to be outside of that joke. Sometimes they're just not for everybody. And we see politically that memes are used in a very, very different ways by campaigns with very different sentiments that they're expressing. So I don't feel bad if I don't know the context of certain memes that really aren't meant for me if I'm not part of that cultural group or that inside or perspective.
I want to bring another expert into the conversation. Jason Rosenbaum is St. Louis Public Radio's political correspondent, the host of the Politically Speaking Hour on St. Louis on the Air, and one of our unofficial pop culture analysts. Jason, welcome to St. Louis on the Air.
I am honored to be taking part in this discussion, Elaine.
So, Jason, similar question to you. I mean, you've paid attention to many a political campaign, and you, sir, are admittedly online a lot. So how is political discourse affected by memes and pop culture moments like Charli XCX's Brat album?
Oh, it's affected quite a bit, and I think it kind of plays in to this desire among certainly the Harris campaign to have an aesthetic around the candidacy of, I guess, brightness, joy, optimism, basically everything that was lacking from the Biden campaign. I do understand that when the Harris campaign co-opted Brat, that a lot of people probably thought that that was going to be the end of it, as Sophie pointed out, which is probably true. I take a little bit different stance on this. I actually really, really, really like that album. And I actually bought the vinyl version of the album before it became a Kamala Harris thing. I mean, Anthony Fantano gave it a 10 out of 10, which is kind of how I got wind of it. I would give it probably an 8 out of 10 because Everything Is Romantic is kind of annoying. But Sympathy is a Knife is one of the best songs of the year. So, beyond just the fact that me saying that showcases that I'm pandering to the audience that knows Brat, I think that the reason why Brat in particular has been able to be memeified is because a lot of people from a number of different generations, including millennials like me, think it's a really high quality piece of music. And I think that they want to celebrate it in the meme-averse so it gets more attention than perhaps it was getting before it came out.
So the quality of the music also, is there something to be said about that?
Oh, yeah. It is a phenomenal album. And I will also say that if you look at my Instagram feed, I made a reel promoting Jay Ashcroft coming on the Politically Speaking Hour, where the punchline of it was me sitting in a chair surrounded by two versions of me dressed up like a shark with club classics playing in the background. And again, that was before Kamala Harris co-opted it. So I was way ahead of this curve, Give me a trophy. I am the best pop culture person in America.
So maybe it's sharks before and after, Kelly. We're going to take a very quick break here, but we'll be back shortly to continue this conversation. This is St. Louis on the Air on St. Louis Public Radio. Welcome back. Now, Sophie, all this talk about coconuts and Brat really gets down to discussing how the youngest eligible voters, who are part of Gen Z, are engaging with politics. And you cover politics for Mother Jones, you're a member of Gen Z, and you served as a fact checker for multiple publications. We all have experienced older generations opining about younger generations, so I'd like for you to help sort of set the record straight. What are elders getting wrong about Gen Z and how they collectively view and engage with politics?
I think that there is an underestimation of Gen Z's willingness to engage in politics because older generations tend to equate straight up electoral engagement, going to the polls and voting, with all that politics can be. A lot of people in Gen Z see politics pretty differently. They see politics as being also about maybe going to your local protests and joining a union and things of that nature that are less easily divisible into Republican Democratic lines. Mm-hmm. And so I think that a lot of times, and of course I also am generalizing hideously here, older folks will sort of say that members of Gen Z are not as politically engaged as previous generations. I don't think that's the case. Mm-hmm. I do think there is a certain nihilism or disaffectedness around voting for president, for example. But frankly, who can blame anybody for that?
Yeah.
People feel that their choices are limited and that they don't speak for them. But I don't think that equates to total political disengagement.
Mm-hmm. And on that note, in terms of the work that you do and your everyday conversation with peers, how are younger voters viewing this presidential election so far?
I think there was a certain despondency and sort of well, either way we're screwed, frankly, idea prior to Biden dropping out. It was two incredibly old men, neither of whom seemed remotely responsive to Gen Z voters. Mm-hmm. And despite their best efforts, couldn't really talk to them. I think Harris has a chance to shift that narrative. I don't want to comment on whether she's done that yet. It's too soon for that. It's only been a couple weeks. Mm-hmm. But I do think that there is a real opportunity here to meaningfully engage with younger voters and with the activist groups run by young people and, frankly, with the young people who tend to power Democratic campaigns. There has been a resurgence of interest there. Mm-hmm. And I think if she listens to Gen Z voters, she has a chance to keep that interest. But I don't think it's a guarantee just because she's younger and her staff seem a little bit more internet savvy.
Right, right. So as far as taking a temperature, Jason, based on what you know about polling around elections overall, how are younger voters leaning when it comes to showing or sharing about their support for particular candidates or parties?
So the polling showed that Biden in particular was doing exceptionally poorly with younger voters, especially compared to 2020. I think a lot of that probably had to do with how he handled Israel's military invasion of Gaza, which from polling that I've seen is extraordinarily unpopular among younger Democratic-leaning voters. Mm-hmm. So Harris has, I think, reclaimed a lot of that lost ground back in the polling that I've seen. But one thing that I have seen from looking at the discourse online, particularly on X, which for context, I don't know is really the best barometer of public opinion because Elon Musk has kind of given more weight to more right-wing Twitter accounts that pay $8 to comment. I'm not saying all of them are right-wing, but like a lot of them are.
Right.
I do think, though, that there are some people very passionate about Gaza who want Harris to do more than she has. And I think that that's going to require, I think it's going to be tricky because she's vice president. She's not president right now. And Biden is kind of running the car on trying to get a ceasefire. But I think that people probably want more tangible explanations of policy on things like that. Once sort of the euphoria over the usage of a very good album in the campaign literature wears off.
Mm-hmm. Now, Keli, you lecture and advise Gen Z students currently, and presumably a good number of them are looking forward to a career in media of some sort. Given everything that we've heard from Jason as well as Sophie, what have you heard from your students as far as their views on today's political landscape and the role of media, social media, or traditional media in said landscape?
It's really interesting because my students tend to be almost oblivious to mainstream media. Most of their news and information will come from other sources. Mm-hmm. TikTok is actually a source of news and information for younger people. It's different, though, because it's allowed them to be content creators themselves, voice their own opinions, make their own edits. So there's this sense of being able to control a little bit more of their voice online than is perhaps not represented, as Sophie said, maybe by our traditional politicians, by mainstream media. But I will say they are very engaged. They care a lot. They have strong opinions. I want to point out when we're talking about kind of the lift that Harris has had, we do want to think about women in particular. And of course, St. Louis University has a lot of very savvy young women in the classes that I teach. And so I think people are hopefully not underestimating the power that Harris has to connect with young women, because women's rights across the board have been so curtailed, and it's a very important issue to young women. They, in the last election, were more likely to have voted than their male counterparts. They tend to be more engaged than their male counterparts. So I think they're excited about new opportunities. As far as media goes, I think so I don't teach journalism, but in our program we do have a journalism track. Mm-hmm. And journalism and democracy and politics has been such a hot topic, right, in the U.S. I don't know that there's a great solution to this as we start to see things like the New York Times and other places seemingly fall into promoting perhaps one candidate over another, or focusing really heavily on Biden's age. But now that he's out of the race, are we shifting to the age topic with Trump, or are we just kind of forgetting about that? So there's just a lot of that kind of discourse. I think they do tend to be somewhat skeptical about mainstream media delivering sort of honest, accurate information to them.
So in about 30 seconds for each of you, as we wrap up this conversation, I mean, memes and online culture can inform and influence voters before they head to the polls. Why should folks who aren't chronically online pay attention to or seek some awareness of the conversations happening on social media, even if they come off wacky and absurd? 30 seconds. Sophie?
I think, like Keli said, memes are a language. Memes are part of how people seek to comprehend the context of in which they live, or whatever it was that
right.
The quote is. And I think that it's foolish to engage in politics without making some kind of good faith effort to think about the context in which people are engaging with information. So like you said, that might be TikTok. That might also just be going outside and talking to young people about something other than, a lime green filter on a picture.
Yeah. 30 seconds, Jason?
I think that people should pay attention to memes because, especially depending on the campaign, it could really showcase the enthusiasm of a certain side. And after especially the last 4 years of politics, which I would contend have been very dark and angry and justifiably a downer. I think that the fact that Harris has really embraced a lot of these internet-based language and memes kind of showcases the type of tone she wants to run in her campaign, which is, again, brighter, happier, more optimistic.
And 30 seconds.
I would say it's like sentiment scoring. You can see from a grassroots, organic place how people feel and what their enthusiasm is.
Okay. Thank each of you for joining us, Keli Jackson, Sophie Hurwitz, and Jason Rosenbaum.
This episode was produced by Maya Norfleet.
Our audio engineer is Aaron Dorr. This podcast was mixed and edited by Aaron.
Our executive producer is Alex Hoyer.
St. Louis on the Air is a production of St. Louis Public Radio. Understanding starts here.
Do you find yourself regularly listening to episodes of St. Louis on the Air? Suggest us to a friend you think might enjoy our conversations, and leave us a review and rating on Apple Podcasts on the App Store. It's the simplest way to help people discover our show. Thank you.
St. Louis Public Radio is a member-supported service of the University of Missouri St. Louis.
The Gateway brings you the day's news each weekday from around the St. Louis region and the state capitals in Jefferson City.
Our schools are accredited. We don't need this bill.
And Springfield.
How many more years must pass before lawmakers see time is of the essence?
I'm Abby Larico. Join me each weekday for The Gateway on the STLPR app or wherever you get podcasts.